as usual, I forgot to talk about a few things I intended in the last video. In this one, we're going to talk about basically making a piece of geometry emit lights. So if you look at this render that I just did, on the left is the orb from the staff. I have flagged that to emit lights. It is casting light, as you can see here. And you can also see on the head as well. I probably should have zoomed in and did a better closer look, but I did want you to see what the difference in, say, making an actual light from geometry versus just turning on the emissive attributes inside of the shader. So basically, let's start this process over, and I'll use this on here on this one right there. And I'm going to expand my perspective, my 3D viewport window here, and we'll just take a look at this right here. So obviously I can't account for everything that you're planning on doing in your scene, so I can only make so many shaders. But in this case, if you just want to start a new one and mess around, then this is a fairly simple process here. On the create window here, on the left side of the bottom pane of your Hypershade, this is where you can create every single shader or texture, or basically any sort of related node in Maya here. If you don't see this window, then you will have to go up to the window menu and then go to the creates, and then that will open this up. So if I close this, for instance, and I prefer just to see things this way because I know how to create shaders outside of this method. I can then, but if I needed to go back for demonstration, this window, and then the create menu, and then it pops up as a separate window here. So now I can like drag it wherever I need to, and it'll dock it where I need to. So typically in the Hypershade, is docked to the bottom, right next to your node editor here. And then to create a shader, you can either just by default it's set to Maya shader, so I can hit a Lambert, blend, whatever I want to. But for now, I'm more interested in Arnold shaders. So if I click on the Arnold tab, I can then, let's see here, go to AI Standard Surface. This is Arnold's default shader that's capable of doing quite a bit here. If you can't see it right away, you can also, under the Arnold tab, there is a shader rollout, and then this will isolate it so that you're not looking at the Arnold nodes on top of the shaders. Right? So here I'll just click on AI Standard Surface. Very intuitively, it's kind of docked everything, and it's hard to see. So obviously the red selection is the one I just made. I can drag it out. Alternatively, you'll see in the top of the Hypershade where all the shaders are, it automatically selects the one that you have created. If I want to clean this up so I'm not seeing so much, there is this twinkly star icon which will wipe the node editor. I can click on my shader. I can right click and then drag down. Right click and hold. Activate this marquee menu. I can drag down to Graph Network, and here we go. Let's just rename this something really quick here to, let's go staff orb shader. And then what I can do here is I can select this piece of geometry, and you can see that it is within this second cat sculpt group here. I can expand this, and then I can see that this is what it is selecting here. So now I will right click and assign material to selection. Right click and hold, marquee menu pops up, assign material to selection, and then you'll see the render view update with this default shader. So if I double click, or if I single click, doesn't really matter, Staff Orb Shader, that's the new one I just made, and I moved my Hypershade out of the way. In the attribute editor, oops, I docked that by accident. Let's let me drag this out, and there we go. So if we just look at this, The default shader for the AI standard surface is always going to have these settings. Basically, it is a white material that has full specularity with a weight of 0.8. This weight is basically how much of the diffuse color effect is going to happen. So if I increase this, you get more of that white. It's hard to explain. If I just take it down, you see how there's less white that is being shown. And then specular, of course, is going to basically turn this on or off, whether or not it's shiny, not shiny, or anything in between. And of course, the other settings we can go into later, but that's not really what the point is right now. So if I say close these out, and then I'm going to look at the emission tab here. Emission, you might think that, oh, it's emissive. If I crank this all the way up to be fully emissive, it should emit light. And it doesn't quite work like that. There's probably ways to get an approximate effect, but this isn't really the same result. So you can see here, I made that same basic shader. I turned the, I assigned it, and I turned the emission all the way on, so the weight is to 1, and then I set the color here. If you click on that color block here, that'll open the color picker, and I'm free to change this to whatever color I want, and then you can see it updates in my render view. I can also select previously chosen colors throughout my scene by clicking on any of these swatches before, right here. So again, this is not quite the right way of doing it because we're not getting the actual light effect that we got here. So to get this to work properly, I'm going to select this piece of geometry, and then we'll go up to the Arnold tab, or Arnold window at the top. I'll hit lights, and then oh, my UI kind of resets. So if you're wondering why my UI looks slightly different somehow, I have a bunch of stuff here. That's not going to change anything else, but just going to point that out. If I really want this to look the way I want it to, let's go back up to the workspace and load my Arnold Shading Tests UI. I'm going to close the UV texture editor, and then let's continue here. In the Arnold tab, I'm going to hit lights, and then I'm going to convert this mesh, to a mesh light. Or did I not click it? I might not have clicked it. What is going on? Maybe. Okay, that's interesting. I wonder, maybe it's because of the fact that I assigned this a shader and it is on emissive. That's very odd, but I'll fix this. 1 second. So sometimes I don't, I lose track of where my shaders are here for some reason. Where is that? But that's okay. I'll tell you other ways to find it. Oh wait, it's actually right here. But in case you could get lost in this UI, when you select a mesh, remember in Attribute Editor you get several tabs. The first tab is the transform, where you have all your basic location data. You have your shape node, which has other parameters that you can edit, and then basically any sort of other history or inputs into that mesh. In this case, we have a shader assigned to it. So I can select a shader. Let me turn the emissive all the way down. And then let's try this again. I will click on this orb. I will hit the Arnold tab or window, go to lights, mesh light. Fantastic. How is this? Why is this not working? Let me go back to this one. This is gonna show up. Okay, what if I duplicate this and I try this again? I don't understand. Okay, for some reason, I'm not sure why, maybe because I was experimenting earlier with these meshes and something got attached, some sort of weird node. Um, I'm not happy with that solution, so let me try a few more things. Let's go to channel box. Okay, good. I'm going to go to edit, delete by type, history. There's no history, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then let's try this again. Okay. I'll just have to accept that I normally this works out fine, but if you run into this problem, then I suppose you could just duplicate this again, like what I'm doing here. I'll delete the original, and then we can assign this as a mesh light. Sorry for the hiccup. That hasn't happened to me before, but I guess something new always happens here. Okay, so let me go ahead and hit the play button. Somehow the play button got turned off, and then it's rendering, and then you'll see that nothing happened. Right? I have, if you look at this group or this mesh, these names got a little jumbled when I duplicated it, but that's okay. You'll notice that I have a light under it, and this is what happens when you assign a mesh to be a light source. You will basically get both the original mesh, and then you'll have a light parented to it. So let's go back to the attribute editor. I can click on this middle button here, or we can hit the actual text here on the side, attribute editor, or I can hit Control A, and that'll also load up the attribute editor right here. And basically, the reason why it's not emitting any light at all is because our exposure is 0 and our intensity is 1, which is too low of a value. So let's take this up to, like, say 10, and then you just slowly get a little bit of light here. Let's hold down Shift, marquee selects this area, this render region here, so that I'm only rendering here and not wasting my time rendering out the rest of this image here. And now I can go ahead and increase these values to however I need to. But by default, this is being lit at a full white value. Let's go ahead and select one of my previous yellow colors because I think I want some warmth to this. If you look at my other light here, to kind of balance, this is not something I typically do or endorse, but since this is a bit of a special situation, it's hard to get the actual lighting effects. Let's actually add the head to it because I want to see if I can get more light to be cast on other parts of the model. I might have to take this value up to, like, say 20, or maybe that's too much because now the environment's being lit. 18.25, maybe something like that. And sometimes it like counteracts the intensity of light, the exposure of light. I have to take the value down. This is somewhat reverse logic, and I typically don't do this, but this is a special occasion again. That's why I'm doing it this way. And then we have one more problem. That problem is the staff orb is no longer visible. All we have to do then is hit the light visible, make sure that's turned on. So if render view is not acting the way I expect it to or want it to, I can go up to the render window menu and then hit update full scene. The shortcut is Control U. And why is this not showing up? Oh, this is not showing up because, amazingly, I am not looking at the right light. Huh. Because I'm still up in the first group, which is this one. And then, so let's close out of this, minimize these. And as I mess up my demo, let's go back here. I can adjust this a little bit more freely. I don't know what, okay, that's interesting. I guess I was just imagining things when I was updating it, and things were not actually updating the way it thought. That explains why the head on the cat was not being lit, and now it is. So if I bring this value down a little bit, so that the highlights on the lit area don't blow out to white, that will help out. So I can maybe up this to 17, maybe even 18, and try and get some more lights. Maybe not 18 because I don't want to change the environment too much here. Take it that back down to 17. I think that's pretty good. I still get a little bit of light on the cat, and then we can adjust this, maybe make it a little bit more saturated. And if I hit the light visible, then the actual bottle light comes back here. So let's say though you don't want this to be such like a light bulb looking thing, and you want things to look a little bit more stylized. I can go back up to the shape or the mesh itself here, select that, and then what I can do is assign it that staff orb shader, and we can change the color of this to okay, so I'm not selecting anything. That's probably why. And let me go ahead and do an update scene. Oh, right. I forget. So I think that actually doesn't work that way. We had to treat it as two separate things. That's complicating it. So I apologize. Let's step back and kind of ignore that. I mean, I think the other way we'd have to work it out is basically duplicating this one more time and then assigning that a shader, turning off the visibility on this light. But I think this is probably good enough. And if you have questions, we can talk about it directly. So there is this, there's that option, and if you look over here, one last setting was if I click on this light again, the shadow density is actually kind of important because if you turn it down, you'll get it affecting more areas, which I think looks a little bit cooler. Turn it on, then I think too much of your geometry blocks the light, and you don't get as much of an effect. So I could do two things. I could either turn down the shadow intensity, or I can turn up the shadow color too, and that'll have a very similar effect. So for now, I'll just turn the shadow color back down, and we'll play with the density. And I think I'm going to keep it like this. And that is the process of creating turning a piece of geometry into a light source.